This is the Capitol Rundown.
60% of aluminum in this country that's being used is coming in from Canada.
We need to dedicate it off the top because what's happening now is it's going into a discretionary pool.
In general, I think every campus is kind of on notice that they have to review everything that they're doing.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now. And thank you for joining us. I'm Sherry Jones. We begin with education and how President Trump's administration is working to reshape colleges and universities, including ones right here in Michigan. Across the country, more than 50 universities are being investigated for alleged racial discrimination. The Department of Education made the announcement last Friday. Most of the new inquiries are focused on college partnerships with the PhD Project. That is a nonprofit that helps students from underrepresented groups get degrees with the goal of diversifying the business world. The University of Michigan is one of 45 schools with connections to that program being investigated. The administration has also warned U of M that the school could face further penalties if they do not shield Jewish students from anti-Semitism. Grand Valley State University in Allendale is also being investigated. A statement from U.S. Education Secretary Linda Mahone says, in part, quote, students must be assessed according to merit and accomplishment, not prejudged by the color of their skin. We will not yield on this commitment. Professor Brendan Cantwell is with Michigan State University's Department of Education, and he told the Rundown that the investigation into GVSU seems to be focusing on the recruitment of minority graduate students. Well, the professor noted that the Trump administration has issued a lot of directives to colleges and universities over the last couple of months, and if they have unclear directives, compliance is difficult.
That has, I think, has colleges and universities paying very close attention to the regulatory space, working very closely with, trying to work very closely with the administration to understand exactly what the expectation is, and really trying to figure out what the potential consequences are of being found out of alignment.
However, there has been some pushback through the courts with varying results. Last Friday, a federal appeals court lifted a block on executive orders against DEI programs in schools, and that allows the orders to be enforced, while a lawsuit from the city of Baltimore and others plays out in the courts.
Makes it, you have to think very carefully about how you're recruiting people, the language that you're using. Certainly the challenges with immigration that appear to be very real for people with certain visa types is likely causing a damper on the ability to recruit international students and faculty. We'll see the full scope of that in about it'll take several months to a year to know the numbers. But in general, I think every campus is kind of on notice that they have to review everything that they're doing, that they have to be very careful about the language that they're using, about the approach that they're taking in serving their students and delivering pre-existing programs. And there's a sort of wild card factor here because the universities can't control what their students do. And it seems like student activity, student speech, student activism, so if students were to protest, that could draw quite a lot of attention from the federal government. And so trying to communicate with members of the university community about what's happening, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and what the potential consequences are is a real big priority for universities and colleges in the state and around the country.
On Thursday, President Trump signed an executive order to begin dismantling the Department of Education. Coming up in the Capitol Rundown, we'll talk to our Capitol correspondent about what's happening in Lansing, including the recent road funding bill passed by the State House, which is now in the hands of the Democratic-controlled Senate. We'll be right back. Welcome back. On Wednesday, House Republicans passed a package of bills that they say would address the problem of funding repairs to Michigan roads. They say that fix comes in two major forms. One would be a gas tax, which would reportedly provide more than $1 billion for roads. Another $2.2 billion would come from corporate income taxes and from cutting revenue programs. House Majority Leader Matt Hall says the funding will be used on smaller county and municipal roads as opposed to our highways. Right now, fuel taxes benefit schools and local governments. Democrats are concerned these bills would cut funding to those important recipients. But Republicans say funding will come from other sources to make up for the loss in revenue from fuel taxes.
There's going to be other things we do in the future to put more money into roads, but we need to dedicate it off the top, because what's happening now is it's going into a discretionary pool, and it's competing with new government programs. It's competing with all kinds of things, universities.
This package of bills would still need to pass the Senate, which is unlikely given the Senate holds a Democrat majority. And the Rundown's Jorma Duran talked to our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic about what's next for the plan to fix Michigan roads.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to help us out. Tim, as we just saw, State House Republicans plan to help fund road projects in the state, but is facing steep opposition in the Senate. So does it have any hope at this point?
Well, of course, hope springs eternal. As to what this final beast looks like is anybody's guess at this point. But let's bring people up to speed. Progress is made because one House did vote yes on this package that does not include a tax increase on drivers, but it does take about $2.2 billion in one form or another away from businesses, and that is the rub. The Chamber of Commerce, the Michigan Manufacturers Association, all of them saying this is a bad deal because it cuts off current state aid to major corporations like the three automakers in Michigan. They are getting these mega grants, and if they are taken away, which happens under the House Republican plan, they are in dire straits and jobs will be lost, the critics say. So this is movement to the state Senate. The Democrats will now have at it and make their changes, and maybe the twain will meet, and maybe we'll get a headline that is real, that the roads are being fixed, not being proposed to fixed, and there's a huge difference.
Tim, help me out. It sounds a little backwards, because usually it's the Republicans who don't want to help with the roads and the Democrats want the roads fixed. And it's because the Republicans want to help the business owners. And so when you're telling me all this, I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's the other way around. What's going on here?
Well, you're right. It is a little strange. Look, at everybody in this town, whether you have an R or a D or an I after your name for independent, you want to fix the roads. Yeah. Okay, we're moving into pothole season. Everybody knows that. So that's a given. The question is, years ago, Republicans were clearly in the corner of business. And the Democrats are now defending the corporations, these mega grants, which were actually instituted under former Governor Jennifer Granholm. Governor Whitmer has said, look, if we take these away, this is a non-starter. It is going to hurt these businesses. It will cost us jobs, and it's just not going to happen. So they've got to find a way to fund this package, and business doesn't want to have it on their back.
Yeah.
Well, the governor has said you're going to have to make a contribution, but she doesn't think this is the right contribution that the Republicans in the House came up with.
Thank you, Jorma and Tim. Coming up, we're going to have the details on how Michigan senators voted on possibly shutting down the federal government. But first, we're taking a look at the continuing tariff war and its impact on Michigan. That and much more coming up on the Capitol Rundown. Welcome back. While President Trump continues his trade war with America's closest allies, businesses nationwide and here in Michigan continue to face economic uncertainty. The administration put 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports, and that could drive up the cost of products from companies that use the metals, including automakers. And the Great Lakes state will feel that. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan appeared on CBS's Face the Nation and was asked about that.
60% of aluminum in this country that's being used is coming in from Canada. Mm-hmm. You take a 25% tariff on that, the profit on automobiles is very small. It's not a big, the companies just can't eat that.
The Congresswoman says she's not against tariffs in principle, and the U.S. should use them against China. Congresswoman Dingell was also asked about the division among Democrats when it comes to voting for the continuing resolution that's keeping the government funded through September. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and a group of Democrats in that chamber helped Republicans pass it by advancing it to a full floor vote.
My town halls look like a Republican town hall. I'm not taking it personally. People are scared. They want to see us do something.
You mean people are shouting, people are angry, people are upset?
They want to see Democrats fighting back, and they're really scared about what's going to happen to them.
The Congresswoman also said it's time to move on and focus on protecting programs like Medicare and Medicaid from potential cuts. And on that continuing resolution vote, Michigan's two senators, both Democrats, were divided. Freshman Senator Elissa Slotkin did not vote for the Republican funding bill. In a statement, she said the bill was bad for Michigan and makes big cuts to things like infrastructure and the VA. She also said Republicans could not assure her that the funds would not just be redirected by Elon Musk. In the meantime, Senator Gary Peters, who recently announced that he's not running for another term, did vote to advance the CER. Now, in a statement, Senator Peters said a government shutdown would only embolden the Trump administration in what the senator called an illegal campaign of dismantling federal agencies. He also said, quote, a shutdown would also give them free rein to keep some agencies closed indefinitely. Well, coming up next on The Rundown, we're hearing from federal workers right here in Michigan who are worried about their future under the Trump administration. And then attacks on Tesla vehicles are raising concerns for the president and his main campaign donor. We'll explain more coming up next. Welcome back. While President Donald Trump's main campaign donor, Elon Musk, continues to cut jobs from the federal government, some of those workers received good news recently when many of them were reinstated. But for how long? The Rundown's Zach Priest talked to some workers here in Michigan who are figuring out what's next.
Not just get reinstated though, but being told you're still on administrative leave is, I want to go to work.
Last week, federal judges in both Maryland and California ordered the Trump administration to reinstate the probationary workers they had previously laid off over the last 2 months. But it's not that simple.
Hopeful, but holding my breath.
That was Hayden Guild's reaction to the news Monday that he'd be getting his job back. He's a formerly laid off, now reinstated IRS worker from Grand Rapids. But the Trump administration is appealing the ruling, and even if the appeal is unsuccessful, Guild is worried about the future.
I'm concerned that even if I am reinstated permanently, that I'll be terminated under a reduction in force in the coming weeks or months.
Guild has been placed on administrative leave and says he should soon be receiving back pay, but in the meantime, he's exploring other options. The same uncertainty is affecting the nearly 25,000 probationary workers who were reinstated. Andrew Lennox, a 10-year Marine veteran who was recently reinstated at the Ann Arbor VA, says his reinstatement has given him hope.
So it did give me some faith in the justice system is still out there and there is still some checks and balances where, people have to follow the law. So
both Guild and Lennox noted the financial burden all this job uncertainty is placing on people. Regardless of uncertainty, though, Lennox says he'll be caring for vets at the VA until he's forced out.
Now, across the country, we're seeing violent attacks on Tesla cars and dealerships as the company's CEO, Elon Musk, draws anger over his work with the Trump administration. Now the Justice Department is investigating these violent acts of vandalism as domestic terrorism. Washington, D.C. correspondent Hannah Brandt breaks down the federal response.
Teslas set on fire in Las Vegas, Kansas City, and Seattle. A dealership shot in Portland. Cars graffitied in San Diego County. Just a few of the recent violent attacks on the electric car company owned by controversial billionaire Elon Musk.
We certainly think it's despicable, the violence that has taken place against Tesla.
The White House and President Trump have repeatedly defended Musk, who's sparked controversy with his sweeping cuts to the federal government.
As long as Elon Musk is doing political things that anger consumers, consumers will take out their anger on his products.
Political ethics expert Peter Loge says this is not a new phenomenon.
Violent protest has been part of politics since the start of politics. It's the wrong thing to do. It's dangerous, and it's counterproductive. You don't make a lot of friends by blowing stuff up.
Local law enforcement is launching investigations and making arrests, and so is the U.S. Justice Department. Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote in a statement, "The swarm of violent attacks on Tesla property is nothing short of domestic terrorism. The Department of Justice has already charged several perpetrators with that in mind." But there have also been nonviolent protests, with people around the world taking part in marches and boycotts aimed at Tesla.
Most of the protests have been peaceful, and peaceful protest is the background soundtrack of democracy.
And Loesch says the peaceful demonstrations can be productive.
Protests can draw attention, create space for a conversation. Let's have that conversation. Protests should not be violent. Violent protesters should obviously face legal consequences.
Bondi says those consequences for people involved in violent attacks will be severe. In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Coming up next, Republican lawmakers have been avoiding in-person town halls. And one Michigan Republican is now directing all comments to a website. Details on that straight ahead. Welcome back. Constituents in Michigan's 4th Congressional District have reported problems reaching Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga's office, specifically that the telephone is no longer an option for getting a hold of their representative in Washington, D.C.
We appreciate hearing from constituents of Michigan's 4th District. If you would like to leave a comment for Congressman Huizenga, please visit huizenga.house.gov and click Submit Your Comment under the Services tab.
Is the voice message awaiting those who call the congressman's offices in Holland, Portage, or Washington, D.C. And that has some people who live in the 4th District speaking out, saying he should be available to his constituents. Others continue to call on Congressman Huizenga to hold in-person town halls, despite Republican leadership advising lawmakers not to do that. But the congressman has held town halls by phone, and his office released a statement explaining moving messages to online only. The statement says the new phone tree increases efficiency, and there were other factors involved, including, quote, significant increase in overall call volume, as well as threats against both our staff and the congressman himself. The statement also says the congressman has responded to almost 30,000 questions and comments from constituents since the inauguration. And if you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing for you. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week.
Get the latest mid-Michigan political stories straight to your inbox with the Capitol Rundown wrap-up. Sign up at WLNS.com/newsletter today.
Welcome back to the Capitol Rundown. Constituents in Michigan's 4th Congressional District have reported problems reaching Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga's office, specifically that the telephone is no longer an option for getting a hold of their representative in Washington.
We appreciate hearing from constituents of Michigan's 4th District. If you would like to leave a comment for Congressman Huizenga, please visit huizenga.house.gov and click Submit Your Comment under the Services tab.
Now that is the voice message awaiting those who call the congressman's offices in Holland, Portage, or Washington, D.C. And that's got some people who live in the 4th District speaking out, saying he should be available to constituents. Others continue to call on Congressman Huizenga to hold an in-person town hall, despite Republican leadership advising lawmakers not to do that. But the congressman has held town halls by phone, and his office released a statement explaining moving messages to online only. The statement says the new phone tree increases efficiency, and there were other factors involved, quote, including a significant increase in overall call volume, as well as threats against both our staff and the congressman. The statement also says the congressman has responded to almost 30,000 questions and comments from constituents since the inauguration. And that is the Capitol Rundown for this week. Thanks so much for joining us.